Hello, Tampa Bay fans. You're listening to The William Haynes Show, your online radio home for Tampa Bay sports talk and Rays postgame shows. Stay tuned throughout baseball season for live coverage after most Rays games with comprehensive coverage of all 162 games from April through October. Got something to say? We'd love to hear it. Give us a call, internationally toll-free. 877-566-1020, or send us a tweet at WHBC Official. Don't go anywhere. Tonight's program will be starting in just a couple of minutes.
HBC. Another series victory over the New York Yankees. It is a good evening to you and how you be. William Haynes here, you there, here at 4:47 here on this early Saturday evening. This Rays postgame edition of the William Haynes Show is live from the WHBC studio in Tallahassee, Florida. Another good evening, another good night, another good game, as it was the Rays 6-3 over the Yankees. They are now just one game under 500. They send the Yankees to an American League East worst 5-9. It was Tyler Glasnow getting his second victory of the season, and what a gutsy performance by Glasnow. 5 innings pitched, but a season high 105 pitches thrown. There was some weird stuff going on really throughout his start in the first and second inning. Looks like he was having some difficulty with the control. I don't know if there was issues gripping the baseball. It was another pretty cold day out there in the Bronx in New York. And then I think to start his fifth and final inning, he had it looked like a Charlie horse, like a cramp in his glove hand that he was struggling with. So just a lot of stuff to work through for Tyler Glasnow, and I'm glad that Kevin Cash gave him the opportunity to finish that fifth inning, because he did have to kind of gut it out a little bit. It was a leadoff walk, and you thought maybe the wheels would come off, and at that point, it was only a 2-run Rays lead that he was working with, but he was able to get through that fifth inning. And that was the day for him. And then the rest of the bullpen was able to do their job, I would say mostly. I think we were all scratching our head a little bit at that decision, maybe to bring Jeffrey Springs out for a second inning, and then after the first couple batters that he faced, immediately yanking him for Colin McHugh. And he had kind of another dead of a performance, and then I guess Kevin Cash came to his senses and ended up going to the A bullpen. That was, as it was an inning and third, perfect innings for Ryan Thompson, and a perfect 1-2-3 ninth for Diego Castillo, as he gets his fourth save of the season in 5 opportunities. So in the absence of Nick Anderson, of course, I think we've all been relatively pleased with Castillo's performance moving into that role. It was something that he's done before, 2018, and even in 19 at times he was in that role, maybe even in 2020 as well. He is not one to shy away from the big moment. His ERA is just at 1.17, and he's been used in some crucial spots. So I think all around, you would be very pleased with the performance of this team. A much different win as far as where it came from. It seems like most of the games so far this season, and again, this was only game number 15 out of 162, of course, But it's, most nights when you turn on Bally Sports Sun and you sit back and watch the Rays, the story of the game tends to be they have tons of scoring opportunities. They're getting base runners in almost every inning. Maybe they get them over to second base, but more times than not, they're stranding men at second and third. They're leaving the bases loaded. They finish the night, 2 for 15 with runners in scoring position, and they leave 10 men on base, all that kind of stuff. And maybe they struggle to find that big hit. Well, tonight, or this afternoon, whatever you want to say, it was kind of the opposite. They go just 2 for 6 with runners in scoring position and leave just 2 men on base. And really, the base runner was hard to come by today. Jordan Montgomery for the Yankees, even though he got the loss, I think pitched a few good, decent innings when the Rays weren't scoring. They were going down 1-2-3 against Montgomery, but it was with the big hits, the big extra base hits, which obviously have been difficult to come by at times. The solo home run by Francisco Mejia in the second inning, which was his first as a Ray. The 2-run shot for Manuel Margot in the fourth. And then even another 2-run homer for Joey Wendell, and it seems like the team is firing on all cylinders right now when you look at it through that lens. There are some guys that are struggling at the plate. Arozarena went 0 for 4 today with 3 strikeouts, and his average is now under 250, and he's had a rough last few days. Kevin Kiermaier getting called up or activated off of the 10-day injured list, and he came in late in the game as a defensive substitution and made a nice little catch where he had to run over a little bit. So it looks like Kiermaier may be back to his defensive self. I don't know if we'll see any improved results at the plate, but Kiermaier is back. And by the way, if you're curious, they did send down pitcher Chris Mazza. His last performance, I think it was a 3-inning stretch against I think it was the Rangers, and he gave up a bunch of runs on one of those games. So a lot of people not really happy with Mazza. I don't think it was the Rays' intention to really have him on the roster, at least to start the season, but those kind of string of pitching injuries, whether you're talking about Anderson, Fairbanks, Chaz Rowe, those moves that had to be made. And we talked about last night that it's a difficult situation as far as managing this roster right now, because I think Brett Phillips, what we've seen from him, I like what I see out of him offensively compared to Kiermaier, although Phillips, he goes 0 for 3 today with 2 strikeouts and is batting just 105, but I think we've seen some nice things from him, and I think might even be a little bit more spry in center field, and I think maybe that will not bear out over the course of a full season if Kevin Kiermaier ends up kind of coming into his own, as I think we're all expecting him to. But with Brett Phillips, I think out of minor league options, it's not like they can send him down. And I know it's typical for, your typical 26-man or 25-man in previous years would include a 5-man outfield. That's typically how that goes. But with how versatile these Rays defenders are, that Brandon Lau, Joey Wendell, Mike Brasso can play the corner outfields. You've got Kiermaier and Margot who can both play center field, and of course Meadows and Arozarena being the mainstays in the corners. I think the thought process was that you could get away with having just 4 outfielders because you can still give guys plenty of days off and just kind of maneuver things around. But with now Phillips and Kiermaier both healthy at the same time, which is not something that we've seen this year, at least in the regular season, they both are going to have to be on the 26-man, and so they're going to have to carry that 5-man outfield. And what that means, and we saw it with the roster move made today, is that instead of being able to carry 14 pitchers and 12 position players and give yourself an advantage in that regard, having an extra arm on your roster, now we're going to be like most other teams and just be 13 pitchers and 13 position players. So it's not necessarily a disadvantage, but you're taking away that advantage maybe that you had. And of course, with the pitching injuries, maybe you don't feel as comfortable with the arms that you do have, so it's better maybe to have that extra one. Well, unless things change, that is no longer going to be the case. I think it will probably be fine, and guys will start to be coming back here, not shortly, but down the line. I know Chaz Rowe and Fairbanks sometime over the summer months, and then I think Nick Anderson probably mid to late August, September, around there. So the Rays do still have to kind of bide their time a little bit, but that's the way the roster stands right now. So I just wanted to put that out there. And by the way, we have anyone listening, you'd like to call in, you'd like to talk Rays, again, take your victory lap over the New York Yankees, because I know that's what you want to do. The number to call, and we have a line open, 877-566-1020. We're going to take a couple minute break, allow maybe some calls to come in, and we'll get right back to our post-game coverage. Again, number to call, 877 566-1020. We'll be back shortly.
You're listening to the Rays postgame on the William Haynes Show. We're live most nights within 15 minutes of the final out to break down everything that happened in that day's game and take listener phone calls to get your thoughts. As always, you call the show at 877-566-1020 or tweet the show at WHBC Official. Like you to remember that archives of previous shows can be found on this show's page on Speaker.com and also on the WHBC YouTube channel. We look forward to having some of you on the show. Thanks for calling in.
HBC. And at 4:56, we are back on the William Haynes Show. Again, wanted to remind you, if you'd like to call the show, share your thoughts, you can certainly do that. We have a line open. 877-566-1020 is the number to call. But now we continue on with our discussion of this afternoon 6-3 Rays win over the New York Yankees. From Mark Tumpkin on Twitter, the Rays have now assured a sixth straight series win over the Yankees, are now 14-3 in regular season play versus the Yankees since September of 2019, and of course the win over the Yanks in the 2020 American League Division Series. So the Rays are absolutely red hot over the team that plays in the Bronx right now, and that's certainly a big deal, I think, over the past couple seasons, really since this Rays run. I think this Kevin Cash run will end up being known to kind of begin around that 2018 time. The Yankees have been, the number one rival, and the American League East standings are a little funky right now. I don't know exactly how much they're going to fluctuate. The Yankees, as I said leading off the show, they have lost 4 straight now, and they are in dead last alone in 5th place in the American League East. The Red Sox are first at 9-4, and that will probably change. So I think the general consensus, and I predicted the Yankees to win the American League East, I know, to the besmirchment of some of the Rays fans out there, because of course, why wouldn't I pick the hometown team? But it was my impression that this roster for the Yankees, obviously they can afford to pick up whatever they need, and that was my main reason for the Yankees having belief in them over the course of a long season, is that, if they have injuries, if they have guys that aren't performing well, they've got the money and they can go out and get whoever they need, and I was concerned maybe the Rays wouldn't have that ability. So this slump I don't think is going to last too long for New York, and I think it's great to pile on these wins while you still can. I think, if you take a step back, not just looking at the standings, not just looking at the record, as the Rays are now 7-8, Yankees 5-9, but the dynamic going on between these two teams. We know that there was a lot of animosity even going into the ALDS last year, and especially from the Yankee side after that series, because the Yankees have always viewed us as their little brother, and oh wait, they got kicked out of October baseball by their little brother, and now that dynamic has flipped, and I think really the Rays have now become a big brother. I think that can't even really be disputed right now. Again, 14-3 over the last 17 regular season meetings. So to come out of the gate in 2021, because the Yankees wanted these series bad. That they wanted to kind of flip the script a little bit and get things back to the way they used to be. And that has not been the case. Again, another series win in 2 series already this year against the Yankees. They'll have the opportunity to go for the sweep tomorrow. It's going to be, by the way, Garrett Cole going for New York, and it's going to be an Andrew Kittredge open, followed by Yarbrough getting the bulk of the innings, and I will talk about that a little later, but I think that's probably a smart thing. You've got that really heavy power-hitting right-handed lineup going up against a soft-tossing lefty. And obviously, with that matchup, you need to be careful about how you maneuver that. And if you can get Kittredge to get the big boys out, let's say you let him face LeMahieu, Judge, Hicks, and Stanton, perhaps, if he faces that fourth batter, that would be big because, if Yarbrough faces the order 3 times through, basically he's only facing those big boys, as Dave Wills likes to say, two times. And obviously the stats show, when a hitter sees you 3 times in a start, then that's typically when they tend to have some success. And obviously, if you've been a Rays fan long enough, you understand that is the point of the opener, of course, and to allow kind of a soft landing for that starter or bulk man, if you will. So it's not going to be easy. I think tomorrow is going to be the biggest challenge against the Yankees this season, perhaps because, of course, it is the first time that we are seeing Garrett Cole. And without G-Man Choi being on the roster, who knows where the hits are going to come against Cole. But there will certainly be opportunities. The Rays have been the one thing that you have to say about this Rays offense, they have always had opportunities this year. Really, the only issue is whether or not they're converting, and I think the same will be against Cole. They'll work a couple walks against Cole, and they'll have some timely hitting, I think, to get men on, maybe load the bases a couple times. But what's going to decide that game, obviously, is if they're able to come through in those big moments. And the Rays not one to shy away from the big spot. Maybe they do and start to flip the script. And not just would it be a series sweep, but they would be able to get back to 500, which would be a big deal. And then they'll go on the road to Kansas City, who I believe is first place in the AL Central. So that's kind of a wonky thing too, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. But now getting, of course, into today's win. The Rays, it was 6 runs on 6 hits, 1 error defensively for them. That was that Joey Wendell play in the first. For the Yankees, 3 runs on 5 hits, no errors defensively. For them, it was Tyler Glasnow getting the win. 5 innings of just 1 run, 7 strikeouts, and 4 walks. What was interesting about Glasnow in his previous 3 starts, which was about 20 innings, he had only walked a total of 3 men over those 20 innings. In today's 5 innings alone, and not even really just 5 innings alone, 4 walks. So, and obviously there was issues with control. I'm very curious to see as early as Mark Tompkin can get access to the Zoom room, and it looks like we already have. Okay, so the Zoom room is starting to come in for Tompkin, and we'll keep an eye on those tweets because I know we're all very anxiously waiting to see what Glasnow has to say because there was no question that he was not looking right on the mound. As Dave Wills always says on the Rays radio broadcast, typically in a season, a starting pitcher will get 33 starts. 11 of those starts, you're going to feel really, really good about your stuff. You're dealing. You feel like no one can hit you on that day. The other 11 times, you're going to feel so-so. You're not feeling great, but you're not feeling horrible. And then the final 11 starts, you're not going to be feeling great. You're going to feel kind of sluggish. Maybe your mechanics are a little bit off. You're struggling to throw strikes. And what makes, the difference between a poor/average and a good/great pitcher is how they're able to do on those days where they're feeling so-so or even really poor. And I think maybe, this is going to be one of those final 11 starts that Glasnow was just not feeling good. And the fact that he was able to gut through it and get 5 innings and only allowed 1 run and get out of some jams and that play in the first inning, not even his fault, really. It was, if Joey Wendell had converted to throw to first, that would have been the 3rd and final out. And that would have just been a simple inning, but instead it continues and he has to see another 2 batters and deal with a bases loaded situation. And then things kind of unraveled a little bit in the second, but was able to limit the damage to just 1 run. I know I saw a lot of Rays fans commenting kind of the same thing, that this kind of reminded you of maybe a Blake Snell start, where I think it's not that the stuff wasn't there, but just that he wasn't throwing strikes. And, I know Snell has continued to have those issues for the Padres. I think he's like pitched 4 innings or less and like already 2 out of his 4 starts. So But with Glasnow, that's kind of what it looked like. 105 pitches, about 62 for strike, so about 50% there. And was 13 of 22 in establishing the first pitch strike, which I suppose is not horrible. This was, obviously, I don't have to tell you that this was a different start compared to his previous three, but in the way that I'm referring to is that obviously the curveball and the new slider that's in his mix, and he even threw a few changeups more than usual today, it appeared. In his other starts, he was getting those off-speed and those breaking balls called for strikes, which was just not something that was going on today at all. And talk about what it reminded you of. His start today kind of reminded me of Glasnow's start in Game 5 against Houston in the ALDS in 2019, where, and Dave Wills had referred to this on the broadcast, that it kind of looked like the Yankees knew what was coming. And I don't know if Glasnow was maybe tipping pitches again, because he's been known to do that over his time with the Rays, and I'm sure maybe the Pirates as well. But it looked like the Yankees hitters knew just when to take the pitches in the dirt, and they were jumping on fastballs. I mean, you look at a start against Miami, even Boston, and especially that start against Texas where he got 7 2/3 scoreless. No one could touch his fastball. They were all late. They weren't expecting it, and then you combine that with the curveballs and the sliders being called for strikes when the hitters take them. I mean, hitters had no chance against him on those days, but today was certainly a different circumstance where Glasnow was getting behind in the count because he was spiking pitches in the dirt and not getting them called for strikes. And by the way, I had someone reach out, and I'll try and text him back here. But yes, we are taking calls on the William Haynes Show. 877-566-1020 is the number to call, and it looks like we may be having someone giving us a ring here shortly. But for Glasnow to, like I said, just gut through it. Very gutsy performance. He was able to work around a lot of bad situations. Some of them his fault, some of them not his fault. And that Joey Wendell error there in the first inning that continued that little run for them. And he got the win as well, which I think was kind of an important thing. And I think Cash, maybe after pulling him a little prematurely, he did have 102 pitches in that Texas outing, and Glasnow was kind of fighting with him to stay on the mound, and he talked to Cash after the game saying that, you know, he wants to be in the game longer, and I think maybe today was the start of maybe that different direction where Cash may trust Glasnow a little more and allow him to go a little bit deeper into ball games. So that's something that I look forward to seeing again. I'm glad that he's healthy. I'm glad that there was at least no issues, it seems like right now. I mean, there was cramps and things like that. And now we're going to go to the phones. We've got a call in here. And we have Seth calling from Los Angeles. Seth, good evening to you. How's it going, man?
Hey, good evening to you, too. Man, I can't believe it's night over there.
I know, it's already 5 o'clock on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, well, good evening to you. Good afternoon to me. I thought, how you guys doing? I think it was a pretty good win today. I think we handled the Yankees pretty well.
Absolutely. It seems like another, obviously, 2 series victories and 2 tries. I think we've kind of manhandled them and asserted that big brother dynamic again, and dominant on all sides, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have to say, if this is the worst start we see out of Glasnow all year, he's going to win the Cy Young for sure.
100%. I'm with you.
That was what I would call a rough start by his standards this year, and he still only gave up 1 run and 1 hit. That's actually kind of insane. He only went 5 innings, but he did remarkably well. Got a bases-loaded jam. I mean, I love to see it, actually. I kind of like to see him see a little bit of adversity, you know, because he's been cruising so well. Having him have a little bit of an issue in this start, I think, is good for him, to be honest with you. I think being able to work out of that is good for him.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I was talking just before he called in about that start against Texas where he was getting those curveballs and sliders called for strikes, and then they had no chance against his fastball. Today it was a little bit different, that those breaking balls weren't getting called for strikes, and the Yankees hitters were jumping all over the fastball, so a challenge that he has not seen in quite some time.
Yeah, this umpire seemed a little rough for like a good portion of today, so I'm not entirely surprised about that. We've had some really bad umps in the last few, probably like last 10 or so games. We've had some awful umpires, like, and they don't do like completely terrible on the ump scorecard that comes up on Twitter, but they have been pretty rough. A couple of these ones that we've seen. This one wasn't all that much better.
I saw the last game against Texas, I believe, and the ump scorecard, the calls gave almost a full run in favor to Texas, and that was the game that went to extra innings.
Yeah, that was terrible.
That's absurd.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrible. I mean, in all honesty, we could talk all day about robo-umps, but that's all we're here for now, are we?
Yeah, it seems,
but I mean, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think baseball, they're kind of trying some things, and it seems, in the minor leagues, they're still going to be trying out the robo-umps. I'm sure it's only a matter of time, but yeah. And that's another thing, to your point. You talk about overcoming adversity, dealing with that with the home plate umpires. Another thing, you mentioned the last 10 games. I would say the last maybe 3 or 4 games have been noticeable as kind of extreme, and it's been frustrating because this lineup has been striking out a lot as it is. But you see like some called strike threes out on the corner, questionable calls, and that this lineup is continuing to come up and continue to battle, I think is good.
Right, yeah, that call against Yoshi to end the game against the Rangers 2 nights ago, I think it was. Yeah, that was awful. and Yoshi's bad as it is. He doesn't need help. Like, he really does not need to have any help being terrible. So I was pretty displeased with that whole thing. I mean, there have been so many. It feels like it's been 10 games. I think really what I mean with the 10 games, like the Boston series wasn't so much bad in terms of strike calling. What was really bad in the Boston series, we really should be at 500 now. That game that we lost, that extra innings game was stolen from us. In all honesty, it was legitimately like taken away with that horrific call they made off the Green Monster, just absolutely awful, which resulted in a whole run being lost for us. I mean, let's say that call goes the other way. Let's say it's not ruled a catch. It goes the other way. Margot gets at the very least a single. We would have scored a run there, which means that the home run over the Monster by Vasquez is a 4-3 ball game. Like, it doesn't matter. Castillo gets the next 3 outs. We win. It doesn't even go to extra inning. Like, you want to talk about adding a full run expectancy. That's just awful. I mean, I don't really want to relitigate the past too much because there's a lot of good to talk about today, but certainly that was really bad. And that changes a lot of stuff. That series sweep should not have happened.
Absolutely, and it's funny that we're only 15 games into this season, but it seems like every big call that's been made in a given game, they've all gone against the Rays, and it's not like there wasn't enough to be frustrated about. I mean, you talk about stranding base runners and things of that nature, but then you add those frustrating calls that literally take runs off the board. Yeah, it is frustrating, and I don't know. It seems like every time the Rays win a couple, we start to get positive and think maybe things are getting turned around. But who knows? Maybe they go back in a slump in Kansas City or something. I mean, I'm begging. I'm hoping they can find a groove here and get hot because they need to.
Yeah, definitely. What I think will help is what we saw today. What we saw today was homers starting to show up. We had 3 homers today, which is more than we've had in any game this year. You're starting to see homers appear. You're starting to see legitimate, working counts. And really what I think the best thing that I saw was today was the 4, 5, and 6 hole hitters doing almost all of the damage. That is wonderful to see. I love to see, these kind of middle of the at-bat guys. Like last night, it was powered completely by the top part of the lineup. The first part of the lead was given by the first 3 hitters. That's great. Love to see them. I would hope to see, Lau got an off day today after being kind of good yesterday. I would hope he comes back and is looking great. That's what I really would like to see. But 4, 5, and 6 hole hitters today doing almost all the damage is wonderful to see because that means that we're getting production out of all parts of the lineup. Willie looked pretty awful today. Phillips looked his usual self. I mean, he basically swings a wet noodle at the plate. He's not here for his offense. but he like some of our upper tier guys too. Like, I mean, Yanni looked good, but everybody else kind of looked bad in the top four. But these middle guys were doing really, really well. Like you've seen Brasso working a ton of counts, getting on base, scoring multiple runs. You're seeing Margot, who was excellent, and then player of the game got to go to Mejia. Mejia was unbelievable today.
Absolutely, I'm a big Frankie Mejia guy. I think he's doing himself a whole ton of favors, and that was one of the big points that I begun today's show with, was that this lineup right now, they're being able to score in a multitude of ways, not just, as you mentioned, the different parts of the order, which, by the way, is big. I mean, the fact that you've got weapons pretty much 1 through 9, but that some nights the long ball, the extra base hits in bunches, they're not always going to be there. They can score with walks and singles, but they can come right back around the next day and score with doubles and home runs. So I think you talk about versatility,
100%.
That's another thing.
No, you're exactly right. And I mean, already the Snell trade kind of looks great for us, with as well as Mejia has been doing. If he can keep this up for even half this production for 60 or for 162 games, I'm sorry, I almost thought we were in 2020. But if he can keep even half this production up for 162 games, I mean, already that's like a huge, huge win. That's a huge victory. That's a guy who should be a starting catcher if he can keep this up. And this is a guy who was a top 100 prospect. Remember, I mean, he was very heralded by Cleveland. They said, great bat, switch hitting catcher, which is pretty much the best possible thing you can have in the lineup. A switch hitting catcher is excellent to have, So switch hitting catcher, great bat. They said his defense was all right. His defense was never really anything to write home about. Today, I thought he was pretty good. I mean, when you throw this guy into the fire, you're throwing this poor dude into the fire against probably the most difficult pitcher to catch in Major League Baseball, other than maybe 2-3 other guys. Glasnow is top 10 got to be most difficult pitchers to catch because of how big he is, how hard he throws, the types of pitches he throws that are very hard. Often, his curveball's pretty hard for a curveball, fastball's extremely hard, slider's extremely hard, and he also has a tendency to get kind of wild. I mean, that bases loaded jam. I didn't watch the whole game, but I listened to D-Wayne at the end. He said that Mejia made some really good plays towards the beginning of the game. Probably could have saved a few runs. Might have been the difference. I mean, he was swinging the bat very well, and he was performing well behind the plate. That is huge. This is the kid that we are hoping will finally make the catcher position not so difficult for us. And he really played his way into that for me today. I think he needs to be getting more starts.
Completely agree. I think at least right now, or maybe a little bit before, the only thing that Mejia didn't have on Zunino was maybe the familiarity with the pitching staff, but even that now is beginning to change. We saw Mejia catch Glasnow for the first time in that Texas game where, Glasnow had a no-hit bid and almost went 8-inning shutout. And so they mentioned that they wanted to get that battery going. They had Mejia catch Glasnow, and you're right, Glasnow is such a difficult pitcher to catch, and I think he's passed the test with flying colors. And I think something that you've been contending for a long time is that Mejia wasn't even the best catcher that we acquired in that Snell trade. You've been banging the table for Blake Hunt, it is, right?
Exactly, and that was what I was about to say. This is really great for us in terms of how we're setting up our positioning here. So right now the Rays have a new crop of guys at basically every position. In the outfield, you got Josh Lowe banging on the door. He pretty much, I mean, as soon as KK's gone, Josh Lowe's very well could be taking his spot. You got multiple other guys banging on the door in the outfield too. You got in the infield, pretty much every single position, there is somebody knocking on the door to start. You got Wander, obviously, which is a huge thing that they're going to have to deal with. Got to have him playing every day, so they got to figure that out at some point. You got Vidal Brujan. I honestly don't know how to pronounce his name.
It's
but
Brujan,
Vidal,
yeah.
It's Brujan? Okay, so yeah, Vidal Brujan coming up as well in the second base spot. You've already got Brasso kind of fighting for a starting bid. He probably should be starting almost every day, So we've got all these, and then the catcher is just this big, fat, glaring hole. It's been a black hole for the last 4 years. We have not had a starting catcher. Honestly, it's been longer than that, hasn't it? It feels like it's been forever since we've had, Darno was probably the best catcher the Rays have had in a long, long time, and defensively not so much, but offensively for sure, best catcher we've had in forever. and then he goes off to the Braves because he wants to play for a winning team. Come on, dude, really? You got paid more money. That's why you left. Let's be real. But, so you got d'Arnaud gone. Zunino's on. He's got a foot out the door already, in my view. I mean, as good as he has been defensively, I don't see really any way that he gets re-signed again if he continues to produce at the offensive level that he has been for the past 2 years. Now, he has been better this year, so he might be fighting. He might be, trying to stay in the mix. But Blake Hunt, I think, is critical. I think because you've got now Mejia fighting for the starting catcher spot, might very well end up getting it in the next, 6 months or so, maybe will be the starting catcher next year. And then you got this kid who comes to the Snell trade and is really just knocking on the door right away. I mean, Hunt, from what I've been told, like I have read about his defense. Apparently his defense is already elite, supposedly, and his bat has been excellent at pretty much every level of the minors that he's played in. So, I mean, this is the kind of guy, you're hoping he's, JT Realmuto, you're hoping that he's that kind of catcher who's like an elite defensive catcher, elite offensive catcher. If that is true, his ETA is probably 22, 23. If that's true, he comes up, you might be looking at a Mejia Hunt battery for pretty much forever. Right? Like, you might not see a different catcher for the Rays for a very long time if those two continue to impress as they supposedly have been. Like, the Snell trade may very well have solved one of our problems completely. It opened up another one, but
yeah,
that's beside the point now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you look throughout really this franchise's, 22, 23-year history. The catcher position has always been that glaring spot, like you said. I mean, the last good catcher we had was for basically half of a season. And you're right, I think they were very savvy. I think that Snell trade, that might be right on the lines of that the Glasnow Meadows trade, with how many players we got back for a Snell pitcher that might be not necessarily on the decline, but I think he's a flawed player at best. And I think the Zunino contract, that was well thought out because they signed him to the 1-year deal for I think only a couple $1 million, and I believe it was a club option for next year. So they weren't putting themselves in a box. They brought Zunino back because of the familiarity that he had with everyone, and that if Mejia didn't work out, they could have Zunino next year. But if Mejia's working out and Hunt's coming up, then they can just wipe their hands of Zunino, no cost to them, and they're fine. So I think you're right. The depth in the minor league system all across the position players is tremendous.
Absolutely. And it's a really big deal. And I mean, it's so much so, Ronaldo Hernandez was the guy who was talked up for such a long time. Everybody was saying like, oh, Ronaldo's the future. He's going to save us. And then they ship him off to Boston for 2 pitchers, who one of whom has been worth his salt. The other one has been, well, Chris Mazza. So, I mean, like, that trade supposedly happened, A, number one, because we got Mejia and Hunt, and B, apparently Ronaldo had not been progressing in his, I guess his defense was kind of poor. They were saying in his, he wasn't really making progress, and so they wanted to move him because they just didn't feel as though they needed him at this juncture with Hunt and Mejia coming in, and that shows the confidence that they have in these two guys. I mean, they're willing to move a guy whose ETA was 2022 at the latest. You're willing to move him and send him off to Boston where he could potentially be a threat to us later, in exchange for having Mejia and Hunt around. Like, it shows the confidence they have in these two kids. I mean, I would not be surprised, to be entirely honest with you, if the Snell trade does turn out like the Meadows Archer tree, like the Meadows Boz Glasnow for Archer. It wouldn't surprise me because, I mean, we haven't even seen Boz yet, so we don't really know how that's going to go. But, like, these guys so far, Mejia has been producing at a really high level. Patino looked very good in spring training, looked like potentially a future ace, looked like the way he was pitching. Maybe he's even better than Snell. Maybe his ceiling's even higher. So maybe he's the Glasnow of that trade. Mejia might be the kind of the Meadows of that trade, and then Hunt's kind of floating around as maybe the Boz. Maybe he's really, really good in the future. And then we're not even talking about the guy who's the number 10 prospect on the Rays list right now, which is Cole Wilcox. Like, that dude, he doesn't even get talked about in terms of the trade. Like he's just a throw-in piece, and yet he's higher on the list than Hunt. So, I mean, I don't know. That trade might end up looking like even better than the Archer trade. It's distinctly possible.
I'm very, very excited about Wilcox. He's such an interesting player. You know, the thought is that he's spent some time in college, that he's more refined, and we may be seeing him sooner than later. And a guy that when he was coming out in the draft, the Rays were very high on. The only reason why they weren't able to take him because his signing bonus demands were too high. Well, guess who paid that signing bonus? San Diego. So we basically got the player without the money. And I think you're exactly right that the fact that a top 10 prospect in our system is just a throwaway piece in a trade. The fact that we got all four of those, and a guy for Snell that's just going to be pitching 5 innings for eternity in San Diego could not have gone better.
And I mean, I'm from Los Angeles. I am the fan of the bigger brother team in the San Diego Dodgers, matchup. I have seen the Padres for pretty much my entire life. They've always been the little brother. And I don't think A.J. Preller making these trades is going to change that anytime soon, because this really is starting to look exactly like 2015. This is starting to look like Preller-palooza. It's looking like that moment where he signed Matt Kemp and you got, Craig Kimbrell, a bunch of other guys, and they all didn't pan out in San Diego. That's kind of what this is starting to look like. Like, so far, he's got a great deal for Darvish, and Darvish has looked good. Musgrove, so far, has looked like the best by far out of all of those acquisitions. Snell has looked kind of meh. Melanson's looked not great. I mean, Keona Keller looks not great. You're going down the list of all these trades and free agent acquisitions. Darvish and Musgrove look good. The rest of them, not so much. And certainly, if Snell ends up turning out like the Archer trade, we might be seeing him back in Tampa in a couple of years.
Oh, my goodness. Could you believe that? Snell coming back to the Rays. That would just be complete insanity.
It would be so beautiful. It would actually be like the most hilarious thing if we pulled that on 2 teams in a row. I mean, the way he's been pitching, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I saw somebody compare him to Tim Lincecum the other day, and I was like, oh my God, that's rough. That is rough. I mean, Lincecum was so good for like 5 years, and then he just completely fell off the face of the earth. And Snell, I said this on Twitter the other day, and I think, it really is something that, honestly, I think he and the Padres really need to look into. I really don't think Snell is like Lincecum in terms of his injury history, because his injury history is not extensive. No, what I would say his longevity could be affected by is his mentality. I mean, you're looking at a guy who cannot stand being used as like the way the Rays were using him, which was done to protect his arm, which was done because the analytics were very clear about how he was pitching. It was done because of his mentality, all those things. And it just, every time they pulled him, it just made him more and more bitter. World Series was probably the final straw. That made him particularly bitter and frustrated. It certainly seemed like that Players Tribune article came off really, really bitter. And I think that what's causing this kind of like, endless cycle for Snell is his mentality is bad. His mentality is at the point where, like, pulling him is a slight to his ego. Putting a pitcher in the bullpen to get him out of a jam, it causes him to pitch worse, or so he claims, and so was borne out in the most recent Padres game he played. I mean, that's not good. Like, that is unhealthy. His mentality is distinctly unhealthy, and maybe his longevity isn't like Lincecum's in terms of his arm, but if his head continues to be in this place, this trade might end up being a steal for the Rays, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the further and further away we get from the trade, it's going to be kind of easier to see. But it was, I think, even at the time, like you said, in Game 6 of the World Series, the relationship between Cash and maybe the Rays and Blake Snell was strained at best. It was coming to a breaking point, the fact that he had all that success in 2018 with the Cy Young, and for whatever reason, I agree, I think he kind of got in his own head. He never pitched the same way he did in 2018, and it was all on his mentality. He decided that he no longer wanted to attack the strike zone, and he wanted to just spike breaking balls in the dirt 50 times a game, and he was going to be out in the 5th inning, and Kevin Cash was just going to keep pulling him, and that the further that went down the line, the worse it was going to get. So I think the fact that not just you can just not have to deal with him anymore, but you get all those pieces in return, another genius move by the Rays, no doubt.
Yeah, when Michael Wacha is throwing 6 innings of one-hit shutout ball at Yankee Stadium, and Snell can't even get through .1 innings with the Pirates. Yeah, I'm starting to think that there might be a bit of a problem. It's the sort of thing that is going to rear its ugly head. I think it's really just kind of like an endless cycle. Like, he pitched kind of poorly, Cass pulls him, and then he gets mad. It's a cycle. It's completely cyclical. He pitches worse, Cass pulls him again, he gets mad. Like the cycle just keeps going and going and going. And he's going to have a poor relationship with Tingler if he continues to do the same thing, because he's going to get bitter at him too. And in reality, Tingler's really stuck between a rock and a hard place here, because every time he pulls Snell, the optics of that is terrible. These Padres fans are expecting that Snell is going to do totally different things than he did in Tampa, and every time Tingler pulls him, they get mad at Tingler, and Tingler gets mad at Snell for making him look bad. I mean, it's not going to be a productive relationship. If that sort of thing continues to happen, he's going to have to change his mentality. Otherwise, this is going to look like a steal. And I think going back to today, trying to pull the show back to that part of the conversation, I think certainly today you got to see the upside of that trade. You got to see, Glasnow really taking over as the ace, managing to get out of jams that Snell probably wouldn't have gotten out of unscathed. And then you see Mejia showing off all the reasons why they were so high on him in one day. It's great to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, the fact that we're already seeing, because that obviously you trade for prospects, you're not expecting to see it immediately, but the fact that, we're already seeing Mejia, he's inching his way closer to that starting catching job, and now Patino, I would say, is probably not too far away. I'm not sure he would be like the number one. I would think maybe McClanahan and Honeywell would come up before Patino, but I think they're all right in that group. So as early as 2021, we're going to be seeing those guys already probably outproduce Snell. You want to look at WAR or whatever else. I would probably see it that way.
I think Snell will probably get back to to a decent point in 2021. It's very early. He's been through 4 starts. 2 of them have been rough. 2 of them have been all right. He's transitioning to the National League. Certainly things are a bit different over there. So it's gonna be a change that he has to adjust to. But I saw some clowns actually posting on Instagram, these people that are supposedly like, legitimate big MLB Instagram accounts, posting that Snell was going to win the National League Cy Young. And I was sitting there thinking about all the times that I've seen him scuffle as a Ray in a short season in 2020, and everybody's like, yeah, he's going to win the Cy Young as soon as he moves over, as soon as he gets a change of scenery. Not really how that works, dude. I mean, the transitions from the NL to the AL and also in reverse has not always been so smooth. So, I didn't expect that he was going to be the immediate difference maker to the Padres. And I don't even really think they did either. Look at the fact that they got that Musgrove deal going pretty much right after. Like Musgrove and Darvish, they got immediately after the Snell deal done, and both of those were with significantly worse front offices who made horrific decisions in terms of what kind of pieces they got back. But, they did both of those deals quickly after Snell. I think the Padres are fully aware of the fact that his transition is going to be the hardest. I think they were fully aware of that. I think they were cognizant of that. And so I'm not really expecting him to show up in an amazing way this year. I think he's probably going to be middling at best. He's going to be like a 3-starter for San Diego. Honestly, if Lamet comes back and plays great, he might end up being pushed to the 4 spot. So, we're not really expecting the same thing. Clearly, me and the Rays fans community and the Padres community. The Padres community expected some kind of lights out shutdown guy, because most of them are casual fans who watch the World Series and watch him shut down the Dodgers. Like, oh yeah, I want that. It's like, it's that same little brother mentality that now the Yankees fans are having with us. So it's they expected a lot of this guy, and I don't really know if he's going to be able to live up to that in the span of one full season with the Padres.
I think anyone who was familiar with Blake Snell and the Rays situation, the change of scenery, that's not going to fix Snell. The change in Snell has to come with him. It has to be a decision that he makes, that he wants to decide to change his approach. Until that changes, it doesn't matter what uniform he's wearing. He's still going to have those same struggles. And yeah, you're right. If he's a 3 or 4 starter in San Diego, talk about overpaying. That is kind of ridiculous, but the Padres were in that position where they had money and a lot of other teams didn't, so they decided that they wanted to capitalize on that. But I think they overspent on some stuff.
Right, and they certainly got away with some other trades. I mean, if you look at the Darvish and Musgrove trades, are an absolute embarrassment for the Pirates and Cubs front offices. Just pitiful. I mean, so yeah, they could kind of afford to overpay for Snell if you think about it. I mean, and the Mariners didn't even make out so hot with the Austin Nola trade. So it's like they could kind of get away with like this huge overpayment for Snell. But I think they inadvertently made the Rays a whole lot better by getting rid of him. I think maybe it is a little bit of a downturn in the first year. Like maybe, who knows? Maybe these Moneyball guys that we've acquired, maybe Hill and Waka and Archer can't necessarily completely make up for Snell and Morton's production, but they can certainly try. And I think it totally changes the calculus 2022, 2023, 2024, and on, changes the calculus entirely as to how the Rays are going to be run. Because now you have 3 prospects in the minor leagues, 3 starting prospects at bare minimum, maybe more than 3, that could be aces in the future. They have legitimate potential to be, excellent. And you got a bunch of guys down the road who are kind of on the lower tier of the minors that might be the same thing. I mean, Boz, Wilcox, Bitsko, all these guys are kind of just chilling in the minors and are going to keep moving up. And in 2023, 2024, you might see them making an impact. So it really changes the calculus for how the Rays can operate. There's talk about, the horrible conversations we had on the Rays Discord, people talking about Glasnow might get traded if he wins the Cy Young. And I was like, oh God, can we please not talk about this just yet? Like, please, can we let him win it first before we even have this conversation? But you have to consider the fact that, I mean, they certainly could trade him as soon as he becomes a free agent in 2023. I mean, in the 22 off season, like right after next year, say he wins the Cy Young this year or next year, and if he wins the Cy Young in 22, you might very well have seen the other 3 guys. You might have seen Honeywell, McClanahan, and Patino make an impact. Maybe they made a deep playoff run. Maybe they even won the World Series in 2022. If that happens, then honestly, I actually might welcome such a trade because we might be able to fleece somebody again. So, it really changes the whole calculus. It's hard to say. I don't think they're going to trade him this offseason. Even if he won the Cy Young, I think it'd be completely ridiculous. They didn't trade Snell for 2 years after he won the Cy Young. So I don't really anticipate that being a consideration for the front office at this point. They know that Glasnow is vital to the core, but that is definitely something that I'm sure they'll be thinking about in 2 seasons when his price tag goes way, way up from arbitration and he's going to be a free agent in a year. They might be considering that much more thoroughly.
Well, what you just described is that's the Rays' way of doing things. They find players that are undervalued and they get them under their years of team control, and they, with their great coaching staff, build these guys up to be great players, and they're, big parts of these Rays teams. And then it gets to the point with free agency and you can't afford the great player that they've become, and then all they do is turn right around and they get a ton back for him. And then 2 or 3, 4 years down the line, it's just the same cycle over again. You've got all these talented players, you build them up, and you just ship them off. I remember we had a discussion in spring training, basically, that this was kind of one of these bridge years. The way the system works right now is all our big prospects and such, I mean, that's 2022, 2023. So we're kind of just playing with house money. We kind of just bought a lot of stopgap guys. You talk about Waka and McHugh and all those kind of piecework starters.
McHugh needs to be gone after this series.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
He's terrible. But okay, yeah, continue.
But yeah, just that was just my point. Is it's. I think we're all obviously we all want the Rays to always be doing good, but the fact that I think even if they just make the playoffs, it's for what they had to work with this year is great, and that this isn't the peak of what this team is going to become. That's really just down the line. We're really just building towards a higher peak. We haven't even begun to reach that yet.
Absolutely, and there comes a time. I mean, there are certain players in the Rays history that they have tendered contracts to. There are guys like Lau who they tendered a pretty, very, very cheap team-friendly contract to because they saw a lot of potential in him. Lau? Yeah, Lau, Brandon I mixed that up. But yeah, Lau, the Chiefs contract goes for like 6 years, runs through pretty much all of his arbitration years. But that contract still very much could be a leverage piece. Like they could still trade him towards the end of the line. I mean, but they had tendered contracts to certain guys that were like incredible talent. Price got a contract. Longoria got a contract. You very well could see that with some of these guys. Wouldn't shock me if they are trying to make an extension happen with Glasnow. Wouldn't boggle my mind. Supposedly, they're already trying to make an extension happen with Randy.
Yeah.
Randy's got 6 more years of team control. 6 long, long years. And they are already apparently trying to talk about extending him for like 10 years is supposedly the rumor that's been going around, is that they might try and give him like almost a Tatis-esque extension that was going on in the beginning of the year. Certainly it wouldn't be for the same amount of money, but there was a report, I think it was by Topkin, that they were apparently considering it. They were in talks, and whether or not it might actually go anywhere, hard to say. I think a lot of it will depend on his performance this year. If Randy keeps playing like he is now, I think he'd be very smart to sign such an extension, because right now he's doing well. He's hitting 250s, 2 homers on the year. He's doing all right, but take an extension now. Take an extension. Buy high on yourself, and try and really perform in the next few years. I think it would be a very smart move by him and his agent to do that. But yeah, so these kind of special talents, certainly I'm sure the Rays are going to be trying to lock down Wanderer pretty much the second they can.
Yeah.
like literally, like the moment they can give him an MLB contract, they're going to try and find a way. These guys are like special talents. But generally, yeah, that model has held true. You've got this model of don't really extend guys. It's not really the Rays way. And if you do extend them, you're going to consider trading them at a certain point down the line when you feel their usefulness has been outlived. Snell kind of was getting to the point where that extension that they signed him to, which pretty much would just eat away his arbitration years, and then I think it was 1 year of free agency, it wasn't really looking like that was going to be a good deal for them down the line. And they were just like, you know what? Cut bait now. It's backloaded. The Padres can have him. We'll get back a huge haul. Works out fine for us. Maybe it'll work out good for them. Who knows? Maybe we'll see him in the World Series.
Yeah.
Hard telling. But certainly, if we do, I think I like our chances. But that's definitely the Rays way. And I personally, as a fan, don't have a problem with that. The only time that I would find that to be kind of ridiculous is if such a trade for Glasnow were to take place after the season. Like if he wins the Cy Young and we don't make a deep playoff run because we didn't have the necessary pieces, and then all of a sudden they just go and, oh, he won the Cy Young, bye. That would be completely insane to me, especially because he has 2 more years of ARB. I think it only really would get to the point where they'd be considering trading him once he has a year left. I think that would be the moment where they would be like, okay, let's start to think about it, But it's also possible they might extend him. I mean, he's a very special talent. He's looked pretty amazing. His ceiling is very, very high. It's very possible they might consider extending him beyond ARB, and maybe they can convince him to do it. He's not a Boris client, so if Scott Boris would sign a client to a contract with the Rays, which he did with Snell, then maybe there's a chance that they can do the same thing for Glasnow. I don't know.
Yeah, I think whether or not Glasnow is a Ray long term, that's going to fall on him, and like you said, his agent. It's his situation is kind of interesting. If you listen to his stuff on the Chris Rose rotation, which I love watching that stuff, it is kind of interesting to hear Tyler Glasnow, the person, over the player sometimes. But I think he holds some gratitude to the Rays and, of course, Kyle Snyder for really, honestly, just getting his career back on track. And if he's like Snell in that regard, where he just wants to make this place his home, then he'll take maybe a little less money. He'll make a deal a little earlier. But if he decides that he thinks he can make big buku bucks and he wants to bet on himself, then that's just going to be his decision, and he'll probably just decline whatever the contract the Rays put in front of him.
Well, certainly the other thing that he's going to have to be considering, and if I'm his agent, I would be considering this myself, Glasnow's old for a younger pitcher who's coming into his prime. In terms of like his arbitration positioning, he's kind of old. He's going to go into his free agency, I believe, at 31.
Yeah.
So that probably has to change the calculus a little bit. Like they have to be thinking to themselves, how much money is he really going to make in free agency? Like I think they got to think about that, because teams nowadays are really looking at prime years. You're seeing guys not get massive contracts because of how old they are. Like you kind of saw that happen with LeMahieu. LeMahieu was in I would argue certainly a very good. He's coming out of an excellent year and coming out of a very good year before that. Didn't get a big contract. I mean, he's 32, so they were thinking, he's not going to be in his prime for much longer. We can't afford to give him a huge contract. The Yankees actually made a very smart move. I credit Brian Cashman for that decision to not exorbitantly overpay for him, especially because apparently the Dodgers were nipping at their heels and trying to get a hold of him, trying to be like, hey, we'll give you that Bauer money, because that was before they signed Bauer. So I credit Cashman for making that decision. And I think that's the same kind of calculus that Glaz's agent is going to have to think about, is pretty much how much money am I really going to get on the open market? Because teams are starting to realize that signing players in their 30s to huge contracts isn't a great idea. So even Real Muto, you saw even Real Muto didn't make boku bucks. He made $125 million over 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. That's not a crazy contract, and that's because he's a little old. And I think that's something Glasnow is probably gonna end up coming up. I think they're gonna have to think about that. And I think if they're smart, if the Rays offered Glasnow a 4-year extension or a 5-year extension for $100 million, I would take that in a second if I'm his agent. I would not even stop to think. If they offered him 6 figures or 9 figures, they'd be foolhardy not to, at the very least, stop to think about it, because his prime years are starting to slip away. This year, next year, the year after that, the 3 years he's got left in ARB are very likely going to be his best years. This year is already starting to look like one of his really, really great, best season ever, most likely, if he continues on his pace. Certainly next year he's in the same position to improve and build on it even more. The year after that, same thing. Beyond that, once you're getting into free agency, those teams are going to start considering the fact that he's a little bit old for a free agent and his skill set does not age well. That's the thing that people will definitely consider. Glasnow's skill set, power pitching, doesn't necessarily age well. It's the kind of thing that some guys do. Randy Johnson certainly did, and there have been plenty of comparisons between Glasnow and Randy Johnson, even just the hair alone. But the thought process has to be I don't know, is he going to age well? How big of a contract should we offer somebody like that? That sort of thing. And I think the Rays would be thinking to pounce on that. The Neander in the front office are going to be thinking trying to convince Stu to let them have just a little bit of cash. Try and pounce on that right now and see if maybe his agent will bite. I'm sure they're going to be thinking about that. And I think with these other guys, they're probably more just thinking extend them if they're young. Try and get an extension through the books for Randy, try and get an extension through the books for Meadows, try and get an extension through the books for Wander. I'm sure all of those are being considered. I think certainly some of these guys are probably on the block. I mean, much as I love Willie, I don't know, man. I think he might be playing his way out of Tampa Bay if he plays half decent over the course of the next few months, and they maybe want to make a push. Maybe they decide we don't want this to be a bridge year. We want to make a real push. I know a few teams are desperate for a shortstop. I'm just saying there are a couple out there that might be pretty inclined. So I don't know. I think that some of these guys are not really going to be so much targets for extensions, and maybe more targets for moving them out the door kind of thing.
Yeah, Willie Adames' days as a Ray are numbered. For the longest time, I was holding out that they were going to move Wander to third and keep Adames at shortstop. The Rays they'll tell you through their actions what they're going to do, and they have not expressed a whole lot of interest in having Franco play significant time at third base. So, I think maybe whenever, because I'm sure if Wander plays in the majors at all this year, I would imagine it would be just as a September call-up. So, I think he'll be the shortstop in 22, and Adames will be gone. I don't see him, being a part of this long-term core. Unfortunately, I love the guy, but I don't think it's meant to be.
Yeah, I do too. No, I think certainly the issue with him is he's blocking a bunch of guys. It's not just Wander. Maybe you could move Wander to third base, but then you open up a whole other can of worms, which is this: how are you not starting Mike Brasso every day? I am Brasso's bro on the Discord for a reason. I am the guy who is always going to be advocating. Why is he not starting every day? There is legitimately no justification for not starting this man at third base or second base every single day. He has been playing pretty absurdly well for the last 2 years. For a young guy, he has been playing remarkably good baseball. And the myth that he supposedly only hits well against lefties is complete nonsense, judging based on the last 2 days. I mean, just the last couple of days, you could totally tell that whole thing is not borne out by any statistic. If you go back 2 years, you can look at all his statistics against righties. He started against them plenty of times. He's done well. Like, he's hit like 280 against righties, 270, 280. That is not a reason to sit this kid out. Like, I don't really think he is a super U. I certainly was on the train for a while that maybe Brasso's a super U. I don't really think he is. I think he might have played himself out of being a super U at this point. He's been playing so well. I think he'd be a hard pressed to make the argument that he shouldn't be starting every day. So in that case, once you have that happen, Wendell definitely has to remain the super U if that happens. And then you have to the unfortunate calculus has to be made that Adames is blocking too many guys, especially the best prospect in baseball history, supposedly. The only guy who's ever gotten an 80 grade hit tool in baseball history. They said that the only other person they would ever have given that grade to on Fangraphs is Mike Trout, and that's if they even had an 80 grade at the time. So
wow,
you can't really justify leaving that kid in the minors or trying to move his position, and at the same time not starting Brasso. You can't do that. So I think there comes a point where Adames is just going to play his way out of Tampa Bay, especially if he has a good season this year. I think they might try and trade him at the deadline. If he either way, even if, let's say they're playing poorly, they might try and ship him off at the deadline for prospects if they're playing rough, if they're not having a good season at the deadline point, which I mean, hope to God they're not, but that might be a consideration. Or if they are playing well at the deadline and somebody else isn't, who is desperate for a shortstop, certainly I can think of the Cincinnati Reds at the very least, who'd be a team that is very, very desperate for a shortstop and has a lot of good pieces to give up. I think you might see him not even finish 2021 in a Rays uniform.
Oh, yeah, I would love to get like a pitcher back from the Reds or something. I think with everything that you just said, I think the Rays could trade Adames tonight and they would be fine because Wendell, he's fine at shortstop. He can be that bridge between Adames and Franco, and everything would be fine. That would open up the door for Brasso to be an everyday third baseman, and then maybe you call up, Taylor Walls or Kevin Padlo just to be that extra backup infielder, and you'd be fine. I know the Rays have consistently said, the big quote is Willie's our shortstop, but they were also continually banging the drum for Yoshi throughout spring training, so who knows? I'm not sure words are quite as valuable from them. So that's something that's on my radar right now. I think Adames' days are very shortly numbered.
Yeah, I think certainly the one thing that I think gives maybe the Willie fans out there some hope, and I certainly am one of those people, so I would love to see him. I worry that we would, even if he does play really well and we were to ship him off, I worry that we would be kind of selling low because of his struggles at the Trop. If he plays really well on the road. I mean, the whole Road Willie mythos has developed for a reason. So shipping him off, I mean, change of scenery might turn him into a superstar. So I think they have to really consider, what that's going to be. And I think that the one thing that maybe is giving those people some hope, like people that really want to see Willie stay, is that Wander has played third base in spring training. He did it a couple of times. He actually, there were a good few times that he played third base, and he also played short, I believe. And I think he DH'd once or twice. So the Rays have always been a team where positional flexibility is kind of a big deal for them. So I think there's distinctly a possibility that they don't really want to ship Willie off just yet. Maybe they want to see if they can get more for him later. Maybe they don't move him at this point. But I think that the issue that Willie has had is those struggles at the Trop, and more importantly, the fact that he's he's going to get older. He's getting older for this kind of guy who's supposed to be developing. His development might not be moving quickly enough. I mean, his biggest season, his big coming out party was 2019. He was decent in 2020, made the last out of the World Series, which of course is a now iconic gif that I see every single time the Rays post anything good on Twitter. I see moronic Dodger fans posting that gif of Urias striking him out. And I'm a Dodger fan, so I don't like seeing that from a team that definitely, this fan base should definitely be better than that. We have our own skeletons in our closet about choking in the World Series, so we need to maybe not, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Yeah. But certainly, his development might not be moving quickly enough for the Rays to say, we're going to keep this guy long term. I think that's the issue. I think that, certainly there's a chance But I think that the issue you're seeing is that he's just not moving quick enough in terms of development. And I think that's the moment in which the Rays are thinking to themselves, okay, how much can we get for this guy if we cut bait? If we give him away at the deadline to a team who's desperate, maybe we can get a real piece. Maybe we can get a couple real pieces. Certainly a big trade to Cincinnati. Boy, oh boy, if we could get back Luis Castillo, I would be pretty ecstatic. Like, if we could get a hold of him, he's been having a bad season. Maybe he needs to change the scenery too. I don't know. Certainly there's probably a thought process of when is the best moment, when is the time that we can actually make that happen. What you just said with Wendell is exactly what I was thinking. He was like a bridge guy. Walls could come up as well and be kind of a bridge guy. Walls, everybody's high on Walls. That's another thing. We're forgetting the fact that we have another shortstop prospect who's just hanging out in the minors right now, who everybody is really high on. And it's funny. I've been talking the last few days in the Discord about how the Dodgers just seem to kind of have these pull these prospects out of thin air. McKinstry, Raley, all these guys have just suddenly shown up and been excellent. The Rays could probably do that too. I mean, I would not be shocked if you dropped Wander into this league right now. I would not be surprised if he turns into Zach McKinstry and is just tearing up the league for like a month, or Yerman Mercedes or Akil Baddoo or any of those guys who suddenly shown up out of nowhere and started tearing the league apart. Wouldn't stun me for a second if you plopped Wander at second base right now, or shortstop right now, or third base right now. He wouldn't do the same thing. So I mean, we are so deep as a team that certainly these kind of decisions can be made, and it doesn't really hurt the team in any way. And the same thing goes for KK. That's another one. We have so much outfield depth. I think they're probably thinking about it. I don't know how long his days in Tampa are. Certainly I love the guy to death, and he's a huge part of team chemistry, but he's, kind of injury prone, kind of getting older, kind of making way too much money. I think that's another one who they're probably thinking about. I know of at least one team who really should be thinking about acquiring somebody like KK, which would be the Rockies, but I don't know if they're British. I'm not really sure if he's smart enough to actually do that, but maybe by the grace of God, they'll ship KK over there and end up getting Herman Marquez in the trade back because of how terrible they are. I mean, the Rockies GM, you wouldn't surprise you for a second if he just sees that name. It's like, oh, hey, that guy's good. Here, take Marquez. I mean, so I don't know, but I think that's hyperbole, obviously. But I think that those two, I think both are probably kind of being thought about at this moment in time.
I'm surprised. I'm shocked KK is still on this team. I was talking earlier that with him on the roster. No, go ahead.
No, you're right. I was just agreeing. It's done. Yeah, I'm surprised.
Okay, all right. But I was just, with him on the roster right now, and with Phillips, you can't send him down because I think he's out of options. They're no longer able to carry 14 pitchers and 12 position players. I thought they were fine with 4 outfielders because you've got guys like Lau and Brasso that can play the corners. So now you're forced to carry 5 outfielders, and I think that's not, where the Rays want to be, but they're going to have to get rid of somebody. And I think, especially if Kiermaier continues to just strike out almost every at-bat like he was to start the year, I don't, how do you justify keeping him with how much money he's owed?
Yeah, certainly I think they got to consider at what juncture they're going to cut bait and try to start thinking about a team who is desperate and stupid, like a team who has a very bad GM, Rockies, that might be interested in that sort of thing. I mean, definitely, Foolish Baseball at Bailey, who I'm sure everybody knows and loves. Anybody who's listening to this show has got to be a fan of Bailey. Foolish Baseball on YouTube. He's amazing. His commentary on the Rockies made one thing very clear, which is that the Rockies outfield is one of the biggest problems that they have as a team, because for some godforsaken reason, they have Charlie Blackmon playing center. The man has no range. He cannot catch balls that go into that remarkably deep outfield at Coors Field. It just makes no sense having him out there. You know who would do crazy, really, really crazy plays, make a highlight reel plays every second? KK would be absolutely tearing up Coors Field if he was out there. So I got to think, the Rays are probably they got British on speed dial at this point, just like, hey, man, need an outfielder? I know you guys are 2-11 right now. We can hook you up. I don't know. So I would be thinking that if I was the Rays.
That would be an interesting trade partner. I don't know. I got the impression that Colorado was not, that they were just selling, that they are not interested in buying, but maybe Eric Neander with his siren songs can sweet talk Colorado into taking him.
Well, certainly they probably are selling, but I mean, a rebuilding team, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have that kind of veteran presence out there. They had Pilar out there in center for a while. I don't know why he's not there anymore. How did he end up on the Mets? I mean, this dude, Pilar, was one of the most mobile, versatile outfielders in the league for like 5-6 years, and they were having, they were playing decently with him out there in center. Really, it's like, I don't know why he's gone. Makes no sense, especially because he signed with the Mets for pretty cheap. So, I'm sure they're thinking like the Rays are probably thinking like, hey, maybe those guys are desperate. Maybe we can like finesse them out. Like, oh, hey, we'll give you KK. You got any bullpen guys that suck in Coors? You want to send us over? And then all of a sudden they turn into studs. I mean, every pitcher sucks in Coors. So
yeah,
it wouldn't be surprising for a second if they sent over like two bottom-tier bullpen players for KK, and then they immediately turn into like top-tier closers on the Rays.
Absolutely,
wouldn't surprise me for a minute.
That would be so Rays to happen. Seth, I just want to thank you so much for the call. I say this every time I think that you're on, that this show is always better when you're a part of it. You always bring great stuff to the table, and I just want to thank you for your time, and we hope to have you on sometime down the line again.
Of course. I very much appreciate the time that I get to spend. I like joking around and hanging out with you as well, very much so. So I wish you the best of luck with the further shows that you have down the line, and hopefully we'll be doing well with the continuing series that we've got going on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, there he goes. Seth, if you're listening, thank you again so much for the call. Always so much great stuff. I love how we can always just take a step back and look at not just this season, but the next couple seasons down the line, because there is so much, that's what the saying is, the grass is always greener on the other side. But I think for the Rays, it really is. And I think sometimes we get so much caught up into where the Rays are right now, and they're 2 or 3 games under 500, and they're on a losing streak, and Michael Wacha and all these starters we brought in aren't maybe playing as well as we want them to, and the feeling that the sky is falling. But that's really not the case. I think this year, it's not, for lack of a better term, playing with house money, and when Stu is involved, there's not a lot of house money that we're playing with, but I guess metaphorically speaking, that is the case, and I think whatever the Rays are able to accomplish this season really is cherry on the top. They definitely want to win now, but this team is just going to continue to get better. This is nowhere near, because I know a lot of teams in all kinds of sports are dealing with closing championship windows and teams peaking. This team is nowhere close to peaking, so I look forward to going down the line. And again, Seth, thank you so much again. It's always a great time. So right now what we're going to do, we're going to take about a minute break, catch our breaths, collect our thoughts, and we'll come back and quickly put a bow on this afternoon's game, preview tomorrow's contest real quick, and get you up and out of here, and you can enjoy your Saturday night. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a minute.
Hey, Rays fans, William will be right back. We're in a commercial break, so don't touch that dial. Remember, you can call us internationally toll-free at 877-566-1020, or tweet us your thoughts at WHBC Official. Also, we'd like you to stay tuned for William's other podcasting projects at speaker.com/user/WHBC.
HBC. And at 6:04 on this Saturday night, we are back on the William Haynes Show, wrapping up our discussion on this afternoon's Rays 6-3 win over the New York Yankees that secured another series victory over the evil empire that resides in New York City. So, the lineup card that Kevin Cash submitted for today's game, we'll give you the defense first. In the outfield, from left to right, it was Margot in left, Brett Phillips starting the game in center. It was Randy Arozarena in right, and then in the infield from third to first, it was Joey Wendell at third base, Adames at shortstop, Mike Brasso at second base, Yandy Diaz at first. It was Francisco Mejia doing the catching, and the DH was Austin Meadows. So this obviously was a little bit different of a lineup. Fingers crossed that everything is okay with Brandon Lau. It's kind of funny that with all that's been going on today that kind of gets lost in discussion, of course, when you win. But he was a DH yesterday, so he got the half day off, and now he gets a full day off. So maybe he just needed some R&R and maybe hitting the town as much as he can in the COVID socially distanced era in New York City. And so I'm sure he'll be in the lineup tomorrow. I mean, if there was something seriously wrong, he would probably be on the injured list. And again, the team's in a midst of a 30 games and 31-day stretch. The next off day is next Thursday, but then after that, I think they go another couple weeks without an off day. So that's something that they're just going to have to manage, and they've got plenty of guys that can play the infield, like Seth was saying earlier. And anytime you can get Brasso a start in the field, you don't have to use the DH on him. Obviously, that's not something they would want to do. So they get him in the field. So I think it's kind of a 2-for-1 that you benefit with having Brandon Lau off, and you get Mike Brasso's lineup in the game. I saw someone, I don't know who to give credit to, but it was either on the Rays Reddit or Discord, just saying, love Cash for keeping it simple, because why wouldn't you have Mike Brasso hit cleanup in Yankee Stadium? It makes sense. Have him continue to do his thing, and he goes 1 for 3 today with a walk and a leadoff single in the 9th inning. So this is not one of those games where it's, all these guys were coming up in big situations. What did they do? Not really. I mean, there was 1, 2, 3 innings in the first, third, fifth, sixth, and that was it. And then in a lot of other innings, they would get like one base runner and be out. Where all the runs came from was they would get a man on first, and then they would just hit a home run. And they had a couple of those, a 2-run homer both for Manny Margot and also for Joey Wendell, and the solo home run from Frankie Mejia in the second. So that's where the runs come from, and then they were able to knock another one in with an RBI double by Frankie Mejia again, who, by the way, I mean, I know this was a talking point with Seth, but we were talking about Jeffrey Springs, Hunter Strickland working his way into the good graces of the Rays. No man is doing himself more favors than Francisco Mejia is doing right now, as he had a tremendous game both behind and next to the plate, on both sides of the plate, actually. We'll talk about him a little bit later. And so the way the lineup was formed, it was Yandy Diaz leading off, followed by Arozarena and Meadows. Brasso did the cleanup duty, as I said, followed by Margot and Mejia, and then a bottom three, so the 7, 8, 9, of Wendell, Adames, and Phillips. So this was not just the names that were in the lineup card, but the order in which they were written, I think, was kind of interesting. We talked about Yandy Diaz as a guy who can both lead off and clean up pretty well. He's been cleaning up a lot lately, and with Brandon Lau out of the lineup, which kind of shakes things up anyway, they just move him straight to the leadoff spot. Austin Meadows has been walking a ton, but not as much with the hit, so they put him at the 3 spot, maybe just to shake things up a little bit, get him in a different situation, and he gets the half day off at DH and is not in the field, which I think is always a pretty good thing. Manny Margot in batting 5th, I think is good to have him in the middle of the order. Mejia 6th, and then the 7, 8, 9 of Wendell, Adames, and Phillips, I think is kind of interesting as well, because Joey has been such a great, I think, hitter. I think he's having one of his better stretches as a Ray offensively. He's leading the team with runs batted in with, I think, either like 12 or 13. It might have been the home run was RBIs 12 and 13, somewhere along those lines. And his second home run, and he's got a ton of extra base hits as well. So, love what he's doing. Love what everyone is doing. It was great that today, most of the production came from the middle part of their order. It seems like too much they've been relying on the top part. Maybe not such a great thing on all sides because you don't want to see your big boys go into a slump, because I think we're seeing a Rosarena, Meadows, and maybe even Diaz a little bit struggle. But when one is struggling, another is supposed to pick up the slack. That's how, baseball works, and certainly that was the case today. We'll go one by one through 9, and just real quick kind of touch on stuff. And again, it's a bit tidier of a game too. I kind of discussed from today. So, Yandy Diaz, 1 for 4, no walks, no strikeouts. His average is down to 283, so still very good, and an on base of 411. So as far as just pure production, not as much with the extra base hits, but he's getting on base just about more than almost anyone else. He has the highest OBP of anyone in the lineup today, the only one that is above 400. Put the ball on the ground in the first, the third, and then a fly out to right in the 6th, which, of course, any fly out to right is almost a home run, and then hit a single with the bases clear in the 8th inning, and that was it to his day. So as long as he's putting the ball in play, Yandy's strikeout numbers have never been like an issue for him. He's always putting the ball in play, and I think that's all you can really ask for right now, and have him continue what he's doing. Arozarena, definitely a bad day at the plate for him, and hopefully it is just that, and he can get things turned around perhaps. Did play good in right field, though. And by the way, Yandy has continued to play a very good first base. There's no reason for Yoshi to be in the lineup right now, defensively or offensively, so I think Yandy is going to probably hold that spot until Choi comes back, and you can even platoon Brasso at first base if you want to get him some more playing time. But back to Arozarena. 0 for 4 with the 3 strikeouts. The average now down under 250 at 246, and on base of 317, which is still not bad. Dave Wills was saying on the broadcast today that he needs to start walking more. That's an issue he's having, and we've talked about that. His plate discipline, he's not getting the full diet of fastballs, in the zone that he was getting during the playoffs last year, and in that time. A lot more off-speed stuff that he needs to start laying off of, and comes up to the plate like wanting to swing at everything, and again, is still off to a relatively good start to the year, so I'm hoping he'll just get out of it sooner than later. Struck out in a 1-2-3 in the first, struck out to start the 4th, popped up to the catcher, so that was an actual bunt attempt. He was trying to bunt on, and just couldn't square it up, and popped it right into the mitt of, at that time, I think was Kyle Higashioka, and then struck out with a man on first in the 8th, so just not a great day for him. And then also came out of the game in the 8th inning, and Kevin Kiermaier, who was just activated off the injured list, came in to play center field. Batting third, Austin Meadows, 0 for 3 with a walk and a run score, 2 strikeouts. His average is now down. It keeps plummeting to 208. I think one of the most drastic batting average to on-base percentage splits. Again, the average is 208, but the OBP of 373, so he's getting on base, 38% of the time, which is still very good, but that's mainly walks and hit by pitches. Is in a slump hitting right now. Struck out in the first with no one on, walked with 1 out in the 4th, popped up in a 1-2-3 in the 6th, and then struck out with a man on first in the 8th, and that was his day, and he DH'd, so was not playing the field, so good to get him off his feet every now and again, and hopefully, to start the season, of course, it looked like he was, 2019 Austin Meadows with the 3 home runs pretty early, and coming up in big moments. He is still, I think, a good leadoff hitter. I like the at-bats that he works. He batted third today, I think, to shake things up, but he's still a mainstay at the top of the order, and would like to see him hit relatively shortly. Batting cleanup today, Mike Brasso. Today, Mikey was 1 for 3 with a walk and a run scored, no strikeouts, and very limited action, 286 average with a 333 on base. So not getting walked a ton, obviously getting on base most of the time with a hit, and getting on base a couple times. In 4 total plate appearances, gets on base twice. I like that. He grounded out to start the 2nd, flew out to right in the 4th with a man on, and then a leadoff walk in the 7th, and then hit a leadoff single in the 9th. So good to see him getting an inning started. That's always good, and Brasso kind of an energizer in that regard, and you like to see that, of course, as well. Manuel Margot batted in the 5 spot, in left field. He goes 1 for 2 with 2 runs batted in, no walks, 2 strikeouts, a 279 average for him right now, a 340 on base, so very good numbers for him, and he's come up in some big spots. It was a 2-run homer is where most of his numbers came from, so he struck out with no one on in the second, and then in the 4th inning with Meadows at first base, hit a 2-run homer, which was really good to see, I think. Into center or left center field was where it was, so in the deep part of Yankee Stadium, no doubt. And then ran out a double play in the 7th, and then came across a score on the 2-run homer for Wendell. So big props to him there. Grounded into what should have been a double play, but he ran it out, and there was an issue. I think there was no error for the Yankees. Yeah, it's just the throw was not in time. So props to him for running that out, and it would have wouldn't have ended the inning, but it wouldn't have allowed Wendell to come up, who ultimately hit the home run with Margot on base. So that's a sneaky thing that's not showing up in the box score perhaps, but is certainly a big deal. And by the way, that was Margot's 2nd home run of the year, and then struck out with a man on first in the 9th. I think might have even gotten a second somewhere in that at bat on a pass ball. Somewhere it happened. I don't know if it was with Margot or not. Batting in the 6th spot, Francisco Mejia, 2 for 4, with 2 runs batted in, a run scored, no walks, no strikeouts. 333 average, 370 on base, but yeah, very limited numbers for him. But going into the game, we found out that, this was the day that you could have started Zunino because of the lefty Jordan Montgomery in the mound. You get the lefty-righty, but apparently the Rays really like the switch-hitting Mejia. They like his right-handed bat, I guess, maybe a lot more than the lefty. I think they like both, but they really like him from the right side. So you get him that righty-lefty advantage more times than not, and he had another one against, I think, Justin Wilson later in the game as well. Yep, and that's where one of his extra base hits came from. And, of course, as we said earlier, had a really good game behind the plate. This is his 2nd time catching Glasnow. The last 2 starts for Glasnow has been with the battery mate of Mejia, and I think they're maybe got something nice working. The Rays mentioned that's something that they wanted to continue as well. So I think that's maybe a sign of Zunino getting phased out a little bit, because that's Zunino's calling card, is he knows the pitchers and the staff and everything. So and maybe just trying to get that chemistry for the future, because Mejia, I think, is going to be maybe a pretty big part of this team moving forward. As Seth mentioned, a switch hitting catcher really doesn't get much better than that, especially hitting the way he did today. And we've mentioned I love his ability to hit singles. That's not something Zunino does. I love that he can just move the baseball, can walk, and he's also a pretty speedy catcher. I know the obvious comparison is to Michael Perez, kind of smaller, shorter statured guys that can run on the base path, and I think Mejia is similar to that. So can run better than Zunino, can hit for average better than Zunino, but to also see him hit for power twice, a solo home run in the 2nd, which was his first of the year, and obviously his first as a Ray, and then hitting a double, an RBI double, in fact, to drive in a man from 2nd in the 9th inning. That was his 2nd double of the year. So 3 extra base hits on the year. 2 of them came today. I think it is really cool to see, and I really like what he's putting out there right now. And hopefully, he'll be in the lineup, I would imagine, a lot more right now with kind of the struggles that Zunino has been having. Mejia is not a guy that's come out of the blue. When he was with Cleveland, he was considered the best catching prospect in baseball and has been bouncing around a little bit. And maybe the Rays have been known for their reclamation projects. Who knows? Maybe Mejia will be one of those. Maybe reclamation project is a bit far for him because he's still such a young kid, but would love to see him get going here. He is 25 years old, so not, incredibly young, but I think is really coming into his own there. In the 7th spot, Joey Wendell. Today, Wendell was 1 for 4 with a 2-run homer and no walks, a strikeout, an average of 319. So he's out of the everyday guys, he's the only guy hitting over 300 and an on-base of 333, which I think is funny every time I see it because he has not really been walking a whole ton, but he is known for putting the ball in play. Struck out after the home run in the 2nd from Mejia. Lined out to Urshela to start the 5th, which is just kind of a tough break, but well hit off the bat. And then in the 7th inning, with Brasso at first base after the leadoff walk, it looked like maybe they were going to waste it with 2 outs. Up comes Joey Wendell, and Bang! 2-run home run that I guess extended the Rays' lead. I think at that time was 5-1, and of course the Yankees put up 2 of their own in the bottom frame of the 7th. So that if not for that home run, the Rays would have been in some big trouble there. And then grounded out with a man on second in the 9th. So overall, not a bad game for him. And by the way, 2 for 6 with runners in scoring position was the Rays today. Wendell 1 for 2, Mejia 1 for 2, and then Margot and Adames both 0 for 1. And we'll get to Adames now, and only 2 base runners left all day. Until it was Yandy's leadoff single, one-out single in the 8th, every hit that they had came via the home run, which I thought was kind of interesting and a good talking point, certainly. But now Adames in the 8th spot, 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. Another tough day at the office for him, but has continued to play a good shortstop, I would say. Batting 180 now in the year and an on-base of 212, so he's not doing himself any favors in any regard, and I don't know exactly what the solution is for him right now. I'm a big Adames fan. I love him. Adames, the person, I think is so engaging to me if you ever listen to his interviews. He's such a bright personality. You see how he gets along with everyone on the Rays. He's just a really valuable asset to have. He's not just a clubhouse guy, but he is also really good defensively. So I know I mentioned earlier that his days are numbered. I don't want that to be the case, but I think it's true, so I say it. So and every time you see an 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts, it just seems like we're inching closer and closer to that point. But who knows? The Rays have expressed a lot of faith and commitment to him. So he grounded out to start the 3rd, flew out in a 1-2-3 in the 5th, struck out with the bases clear in the 7th, and then with a man on second base in the 9th, also struck out. So I don't want to go too deep into his at-bats today just because we're pushing time a little bit, and it's not necessarily anything that you don't know. He's been just struggling at the plate, has been worked around by some of these pitchers. And that's how Adames goes. He chases pitches early in counts that he shouldn't, and then he'll take strikes looking late in counts that he should be swinging at. So basically his approach just needs to be reversed. Take pitches early in counts and late in counts. With 2 strikes, if you get a pitch to hit, you need to hit it. But he's been taking a lot of called strike 3s, which is a concern. Both of his strikeouts today, though, were swinging. In the 9th spot, Brett Phillips, he got 3 at-bats here today. He goes 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts, batting 105 and an on-base of 217. Really, the numbers, I thought he was doing much better than this, but does not have a whole ton of discipline at the plate. I do like what he has as a base runner, and those things could really, be a Kiermaier guy that could swipe a bag and those things. And I thought has done a good job at center field, but it looks like Kiermaier is now ready to retake that spot, and Phillips, I guess, will become the 5th outfielder on this roster. He subbed in the bottom of the 8th to play right field. I think that's one of the first times we've seen him in the corners. I think he's pretty much been in center every time, so that's where he'll be playing pretty much. He'll be in center on off days for Kiermaier, unless they want to have Margot there, and then he'll be in the corners the rest of the time and a main pinch runner guy. And maybe if it's Game 4 of the World Series, you have him pinch hit in the 9th inning. I know he didn't pinch hit. He was in the lineup as a pinch runner before, but you get my point. He struck out in a 1-2-3 in the 3rd, struck out in a 1-2-3 in the 5th, and then grounded out to the pitcher to start the 8th. So not a whole lot going for him there, and that's really all I can say about that. So a different lineup, I would say it worked out. As Seth mentioned, getting that production out of the middle of the order was great. Mejia his 2nd double of the year and his 1st home run, and both Margot and Wendell with their 2nd home runs of the year. So interesting that today they put up 3 home runs. Yesterday they score 8 runs without a single home run, which in Yankee Stadium is incredibly rare. I know they mentioned it in the broadcast, but I don't remember the exact number. And then talking about the pitchers, we talked about Glasnow, so I won't belabor that point too much, but the fact that I don't think last year or the year before he might have been able to navigate this spot. And the fact that, this is one of those days where you're really not feeling yourself, and he was dealing with cramps and all kinds of issues, it was clear. And he was still able to give the Rays 5 innings and just 1 run allowed, which I think is gigantic. That's really all I can say about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about his performance before he comes up for his 4th time through the rotation. I believe this was his Oh, no, this was his 4th start. We are now going a 4th time through the rotation, so I can't believe his next time is going to be his 5th start of the year. It's amazing we're already there. He's 2-0 with an 0.73 ERA. I wouldn't argue with if you were to say he's the front runner for the AL Cy Young. I would certainly give him that. I don't watch a ton of other guys. I mean, I know Bieber and Lucas Giolito have been off to some hot starts, and there's always some dark horses in there as well. So, but very pleased with Glasnow. Springs came in because Glasnow was able to finish the 6th. So yeah, we're gonna have to crack open the scorebook here. So Springs comes on in the 6th and gets Torres, Gardner, Sanchez 1, 2, 3. So that's good. And then Cash makes the odd decision to me. That's the first head scratcher of the day to have him start the 7th. I don't understand. Just have the guys go 1 inning. He threw 21 pitches, so he's probably out tomorrow, I would say. He strikes out Urshela to start the 7th, and then gives up a home run to Rougned Odor, lefty on lefty, and a guy in Odor who has not been great. So maybe that's just a pitch that gets away from him. But then Cash leaves him in, gives up a single to, or no, I'm sorry. That after the Rougned Odor home run, that was Springs' day. Cash comes out and gives him the hook. So he finishes with an inning and a third, 1 run on 1 hit. Obviously, the home run, no walks, 2 strikeouts. I think that might have been his first earned run. His ERA is only 1.50, and he I think is working his way into what is at least right now the A bullpen, and a left-hander is one of the only guys like that they have doing that. So after that, with 1 out and the bases empty, in the top of the order coming up, this is the big concern that I have. You could have brought in just Ryan Thompson there in that spot. No, they bring in Colin McHugh, who has been struggling mightily. You look at his performances this year, was horrible in his season debut against the Marlins. I know he hasn't pitched since 2019, so that might still be the issue. Pitched 3 innings scoreless in Boston in garbage time, and then had that meltdown in the 10th inning of that Sunday game against the Yankees at the Trop, where he gave up 4 total runs and just couldn't get out of his own way. So, why you bring him in what was at that time, I believe, a 5-2 ball game, so it's a save situation. Technically, you bring him in to face, because you have to face at least 3 men. He's gonna have to face LeMahieu, Judge, and Hicks. So I guess it's good that the Rays won, because that was to me kind of a boneheaded move, and maybe one of the first Kevin Cash bullpen gaffes of the year. Gives up a single to LeMahieu. What else is new? An RBI double to Judge right after. That was almost a home run. So it was 5-3 at that point, and then put the 4th run in scoring position and brought the tying run to the plate in Hicks. Thankfully, he strikes out Aaron Hicks, who's just been horrendous at the plate. He's batting 174 right now, and definitely under expectations for what the Yankees are wanting from him. So he gets the hook there. Man on second with 2 outs for Giancarlo Stanton, and they bring in, do the Rays, Ryan Thompson, who should have been in there all along. So McHugh finishes with just 1 out, an earned run on 2 hits, no walks, a strikeout. 15 pitches, was 2 for 3 in establishing the first pitch strike. Yeah, not big takeaways. His fastball is not fooling anyone. His slider is not fooling anyone. I don't understand the allure to him right now. An ERA of 10.13. He's a garbage time innings eater right now. I don't understand why you would want to have him in any other spot, let alone against the 1-2-3 against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium when you're leading only a couple runs. So that's my piece on that. Ryan Thompson comes in with Aaron Judge at second and strikes out Giancarlo Stanton. And then, as he's been prone to do, we saw him do this last weekend against the Yankees at the Trop. He'll come out to get out of a jam, and then he'll come out to start the next inning, and he's savvy in that regard. And like I said, I think yesterday or the day before, when he's not walking anybody, he's really hard to get runs against. And so in the 8th inning, he gets Torres, Gardner, and Higashioka out 1-2-3 for a clean inning there. And then that set up the 9th inning save situation for Diego Castillo. Strikes out Urshela, gets Rougned Odor to ground out, and then strikes out DJ LeMahieu for the final out of a Rays 6-3 win. That was Diego Castillo's 4th save and 5 opportunities. Right now is the highest leverage guy that the Rays have, and he's been performing very well. A couple of miscues, but not much. I think he's looking like 2018, 2019 Castillo. A 1.17 ERA right now, and again, his fourth save. He's saved over half of the Rays' wins this year, so that's good. The Rays improved to 7-8 on the year. They're 4-4 on the road. Dropped the Yankees to 5-9, who are 3-5 at home, which is kind of interesting. The Yankees are now dead last in the AL East. The Rays are now in third place. They are just 3 games back of the Boston Red Sox. So now we turn the page to tomorrow's game. It doesn't look like we have any news from Tompkin or anything like that about Glasnow start. I'm sure it'll be in the paper tomorrow, and we'll get some more information to talk to you tomorrow afternoon/evening. Tomorrow at 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time in the Bronx, Rays Yankees for the series finale. The Rays have already secured the series victory, so they'll be going for the sweep and try to get back to 500. It'll be Ryan Yarbrough, the lefty. It'll be Andrew Kittredge to open against Garrett Cole. So I would imagine Kittredge is just there to face LeMahieu, Judge, Hicks, and maybe, if he walks a man or something, he'll get Stanton out. I don't imagine he would start the second inning, but just get through those big boys at least once, and then he'll give way to Ryan Yarbrough, the 29-year-old left-hander. Right now is 0-2 on the year with a 6.48 earned run average. His last time out against the Texas Rangers, 6 innings of 6 runs, 10 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. He's limited the walks, only 2 walks and 3 starts. But outside of that, it's really struggled. That start against Texas was his second straight start of 6 earned runs, or as Dave Will says, 6 earnies. 9 hits, and the Boston start, and 10 hits, and the Rangers start. So this is not a good spot for him. The Yankees, they have the righty-lefty. They like soft tossers usually. I'd imagine they're looking to tee off on Yarbrough, but usually those are the spots where he'll end up putting out a gem like Waka did on Friday night, which I was not expecting. 6 shutout innings and almost a career high in strikeouts. Looking back to 2020, let's just see if he faced the Yankees. I know that he did. He even had a start, or I think a pretty good bulk in the playoffs. So, and that was the only time he faced the Yankees was in the postseason. It was, let's see what game it was. Game 4 of the ALDS. That was the game that the Rays lost. It was Ryan Thompson opening. And then Yarbrough had 5 innings, 2 runs on 6 hits. So it was effective. So that was the last time he played New York, in case you're wondering. And my expectation for him, so Kittredge gets 1, Yarbrough probably will get 4 or 5 innings after that. He threw 93 pitches last time out, so he stretched out. The score might kind of dictate his outing, to be quite honest with you. They may give him the quick hook if they want to go to the bullpen. And then after that, relievers, everyone is pretty much in play. They could have Castillo going a back-to-back. Springs maybe not, and Thompson maybe not, because they both pitch more than an inning, but Cash has not been shy to have those guys that have pitched multiple innings on back-to-back, so you never know. And then, of course, you've got, Kittredge will already be pitching. Cody Reed is a candidate for maybe multi-innings. Strickland can get you some outs, and as the bullpen sits right now, that's about it. Because that's not a spot for Trevor Richards, and he wouldn't even be ready. He still needs to rest. So you're going to have guys going back-to-backs, but if it's a safe situation, definitely would be Castillo. And then for the Yankees, the ace, the 30-year-old right-hander Garrett Cole is 2-0 on the year with a 147 earned run average. His last time out in Dunedin against the Blue Jays, 6 innings of work, 1 run on 3 hits, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts, 98 pitches, so he stretched out. Looking at his 3 starts, 2 walks, no walks, 1 walk. He's not going to give you base runners. And then in those 3 starts, 8 strikeouts, 13 and 8 punch-outs. So he's going to be doing that again. He's off to a nice start in the year. He had 7 innings of shutout work against the Orioles, and then another start against the Jays, 5 1/3 of 2 runs. So he's been, hasn't been lights out necessarily, but has been very good. Looking at the last time he faced the Rays, he faced him a couple times in the playoffs. So he had 4 total starts. I guess I'll just rattle them off here. I'll just give you real quick. 4 2/3, 3 hits, 3 runs on 6 hits. Then we have 6 2/3, 2 runs on 6 hits, 5 innings, 4 runs on 8 hits, and then in the playoffs, in Game 1, 6 innings, 3 runs on 6 hits, and then in Game 5, in that loss, 5 1/3, 1 run on 1 hit, and that was the solo home run, of course, to Austin Meadows. So had a lot of work against the Rays last year in a shortened season. Saw him actually 5 times, which is kind of amazing. And that was kind of the pattern, is that I would imagine maybe 5 or 6 innings and maybe a couple of runs is what I would fully anticipate. And on a Sunday afternoon, the Bronx will be roaring for him. This was a sellout, by the way, for the Yankee Stadium, 10,583. So I'll imagine it would probably be the same for their A's tomorrow. And it is kind of neat. I mean, obviously, with them throwing baseballs on the field last night, it's not tremendous, but it's just good to kind of hear fans and stuff back in the ballpark. It feels a little bit more normal. It was so weird seeing Yankee Stadium completely empty last year. It was kind of haunting, to be honest. And then the lineup, put in all the lefties. It'll be, Wendell at third. Lau will be back at second. This could be an opportunity for Yoshi, but I don't know why you would want to throw him to Cole. So maybe Brasso or Diaz at first base. And then in the outfield, they'll go probably Meadows in left, Kiermaier in center, or Rosarena in right. And they could go Mejia again, but I would imagine probably Zunino to catch tomorrow. And then, like I said, the bullpen, just about everyone is available. Even Springs and Thompson could pitch on a back-to-back. And hopefully we will be talking tomorrow afternoon/evening about a win and a series sweep and all that good stuff. Would love to beat Cole. That would be big. The first time that the Rays will face him this year. Thanks to everyone who tuned into the program. A special thank you to Seth from Los Angeles for the call this evening. A great call as always. One of the best ones I think we've had so far. Just very, very good, riveting conversation, getting in depth about all things Rays, and I always appreciate the time that we can spend together on this show. Look forward to maybe having some people call in tomorrow. Again, we'll be on the air after the game. Cole, Yarbrough behind the opener. Hopefully the dub after. We will talk to you then.
Sports Radio 101.9 FM and Sports Radio 66 FM.
HBC.